Alright guys, welcome to a new video. In this video we're going to be playing Diablo 3 and I'll be showing you guys my Multishot Demon Hunter build. Now this build excels at AoE combat, it's going to be really efficient at farming higher torments, and you can reach around 55 plus solo greater rifts. Obviously you can get higher with teams. Now starting off we're going to take a look at the gear. Now this entire build runs solely off of the Unhallowed Essence set bonus. So you're going to need all 6 pieces of the Unhallowed Essence, which includes the Accursed Visage, Hellwalkers, Unholy Plates, Unsanctified Shoulders, Cage of the Hellborn, and Fiendish Grips. The main thing I'd recommend out of all these pieces is on your body, make sure you have plus 12 maximum discipline as a secondary roll. The reason for this is the 6 set bonus for this set is your generators and multi-shot deal 15% increased damage for every point of discipline you have. Now I have 81 discipline, so 81 times 15% damage is a lot. So that's something you definitely want to make sure you have. Next set of the items you'll need are the bow and quiver. So the bow I'd recommend Yang's Recurve. Same again, plus 12 maximum discipline roll. Make sure you have that. It's too good a damage to not have. You may think, oh, 100 dexterity. That looks nice. But the 12 discipline is just such a huge damage increase that you can't afford not to have it really. Now, unlike mine, don't go for arcane damage, try and get fire damage or base damage on it. Fire damage is the best, but base damage is good too. The multi-shot attacks 50% faster is pretty much the best passive you can get on a bow for this build, so you don't have to have Yang's Recurve, but I'd recommend it if you can get it. In terms of quiver, Dead Man's Legacy. The secondary passive, multi-shot hits enemies below 60%-ish health twice, basically doubling your damage at a certain health. Once again, roll for 12 maximum discipline on your quiver if you can. The quiver's not as necessary as the bow, however, I'd recommend it above any others. I wouldn't say there's any even close alternatives to it. Now is where the build gets a little more open for interpretation. I use focus and restraint set rings because you're constantly proccing both your generating and resource spending attacks, so you're pretty much getting 100% damage increase constantly, so I wouldn't say there's anything better than those two. However, you can use some alternatives if you don't have them available at the time. Now in terms of necklace, a socket is necessary. Other than that, you can use what you'd like. So here I'm using Ouroboros. If you get a necklace which rolls crit hit damage and crit hit chance and a necklace socket, go for it. You technically want one of those free at least. The best in slot for necklace is the Countess Julia's cameo. As you can see here, it's a real nice increase on the one I have already in terms of damage, and you prevent all arcane damage, which gives you much needed toughness. However, it doesn't have a socket, so I'm not using it. The socket is just too important because some of the higher tier gems you can get just give you so much damage or so much utility that it's just not worth not having. You can also use a Hellfire necklace for a passive. I'll show you the passives I'm using for now, I'll touch more on it later, but if you use a Hellfire necklace and get one of these passives, you'll be getting awareness as your 5th passive. So essentially, if you don't get good rolls on the necklace, I would not recommend using a Hellfire necklace. I just don't think a 5th passive is really necessary for this build. It's nice to add some extra survivability, but you might be losing about 20% damage depending on what you get as your rolls, so it's probably not a good trade-off. Obviously it's up to you. Next, the most up for interpretation parts of the build, definitely the waist. I'm using Hunter's Wrath. The secondary bonus is your primary skills attack 30% quicker and deal increased damage. Now the primary attack is only evasive fire in this build, so the only reason I'd even consider using it is because I only use evasive fire to proc my ring and to increase my hatred if I'm running low. So it's just nice to get the attack speed in because you increase hatred quicker. You can also use Witching Hour, does a bunch more damage. It's technically up to you, but I'm sticking with the Hunter's Wrath just so I get a bit more utility in my build instead of just raw damage. And lastly, the wrists. The Reaper's Wraps is my choice here, just because I like to restore health using the health globes as my primary resource, because it's just such a huge increase, especially when you're farming the lower torments, so you can just pick up so many health orbs and you just constantly max hatred. However, The Wraps of Clarity are technically best in slot. The secondary passive is your Hatred Generators reduce your damage taken by 33%. You're constantly using your Hatred Generators because you're going to be proccing your rings. So essentially you'll be walking around the rifts with a constant 33% damage increase, which actually gives this build its much needed toughness, because that is one of the main weaknesses of this build, is that you cannot deal with extreme damage. Now going away from the build towards the gems, helmet, you pretty much necessary to have an amethyst in, the best you can make. You can use diamond for a bit of cooldown reduction. With the skills I'm using, the cooldown reduction will only affect your companion and your vengeance, but I'd much rather have the toughness you get from the 23% life. Like that's huge. And in terms of body, legs, bow and quiver, if you have one equipped on that, pretty much need emeralds. The dexterity, the damage is just huge on it. Now in terms of gemming up your jewellery, make sure you have a socket on your rings and your necklace, because it's just too huge not to. Now, the one jewel I'd recommend over everyone else is the Zai Stone of Vengeance. It increases your damage depending on how far away you are from your enemy. With this build, you're going to be miles away from your enemy, so you're pretty much going to be hitting your max damage on that 33%. So that's definitely a must-have. Now, solo play, some people do not like Bane and Trapped, because the only thing that procs you slow is your Evasive Fire. People think that Evasive Fire has only got that short range. See how short that looks? It actually hits miles off. It hits just as far as Multishot. I don't know why the animation only shows a little range, but it's actually much huger. So, Bane of Trapped is extreme damage increase. If you're playing in a group, 100% use Bane of the Trapped. If you're playing solo, you can swap it out for either Bane the Powerful, assuming you're not using it already, or Bane of the Stricken, assuming you're not using it already. And for the third gem, I would recommend Bane of the Stricken in higher torments, higher rifts, because one of the main problems this build has, one-on-one combat is poor. It struggles to deal with stronger bosses, stronger Rift Guardians. So this Bane of the Trapped, obviously, as the fight goes on longer, you're gaining more damage, and obviously you get just a general 25% increased damage against bosses and Rift Guardians, which is just huge in general. You can also use Bane of the Powerful. I definitely recommend using that over Stricken in lower torments, like Torment 7 farming, just because it gives you a general 20% damage increase, and you're basically one-hitting all the trash mobs anyway, and the Rift Guardians are just no problem to take out at that point. You won't be stacking enough on your Bane of the Stricken before they die anyway for it to be a relevant input. Now if you're using Bane of the Trapped solo, you can use Ice Blink as a second gem, just so you're proccing much more slows, getting the damage. Personally, I don't like using Ice Blink. I don't like putting 2 gems into getting damage off 1. So I'd recommend using something else if you're going for that, like the Taiguk, because you're constantly proccing your rings, you're constantly proccing everything, you're going to be getting stacks on that constantly, and you're going to be stacking up to a high level where you're actually going to be getting quite a lot of increased armor as well, which gives you a lot of needed survivability. The Taiguk is very good solo. I probably would not recommend it in a group, just because most groups tend to have some sort of heal monk, which basically negates the need for Taiguk. At higher levels, you will be getting more damage out of Taiguk if you can keep it stacked. It's up to you. These gems are swappable however you see fit. If you're getting wrecked, Esoteric Alteration gives you a lot of damage reduction, especially at lower HP. I'm not a fan, just because I feel like this build does need all the damage it can get to stay relevant at later torments and later rifts. However, if you really are getting wrecked, then you can use the Esoteric Alteration, which is not a bad gem. However, it just doesn't fit too well in with this build. The next I'll be moving on to Paragon points. For the core, I recommend speccing into movement speed up to 25% cap first, then into dexterity, then vitality, then maximum hatred. Most people say maximum hatred before vitality. I mean, you just don't run out of hatred with this build, so I don't see the need for it. Whereas you do get fucked up sometimes, so the vitality can be, slightly useful. In terms of offense, crit hit damage first, then crit hit chance, then attack speed, then cooldown reduction. Pretty much the only way to go in terms of that tree. For defense, resist all, make sure you spec that first, is huge, then life, then armor, then life regen. And utility, area damage first, resource cost reduction second, and life on hit third. Now in terms of the abilities I'm going to be using, as well as the passives, for our mouse skills I'm going to be using Evasive Fire with the Focus Rune. It applies cold effects, as well as slows, which obviously procs with my my Bane of the Trapped, as well as actually regenerating quite significant hatred just because of the rune itself. And my other mouse skill is going to be Multishot, of course. Literally the bread and butter of this build is what everything's centered around. I'm using the Arsenal rune here because it allows you to fire rockets off, which hits nearby enemies for 300% weapon damage, as fire, which stacks with your fire damage increases, as well as ballistics, which is just great passive and weapon synergy. It really does a huge amount of damage. Now for your action bar skills, these are probably the most up for interpretation skills of the build. You can swap them around you want. I'm using Companion with Wolf Companion, just because I tend to play in groups. It gives everyone a nice damage increase for a time. You can also use Boar Companion if you're solo, just to get something to taunt the enemies off of you if you're getting a bit wrecked. Same with Spider Companion, it actually slows enemies, so that'll work with your Bane of the Trapped. You can swap Companion out for other things if you want. You can swap it for Cold Drops, you can swap it for Smoke Screen. I prefer Companion, it's up to you of course. Vault, same here, you can swap this for Smokescreen if you want. I feel like with the Trail of Cinders, as I'll be showing you later with my Kanai's Cube, you'll be able to vault a just disgusting amount of times just because the amount of reduction we'll be getting on it. Most people say Tumble's better, it is not. Trail of Cinders is way better with this build, it's way better. Once again, you can swap that for Smokescreen if you don't like Vault. I feel like with Trail of Cinders though, Vault is just way better. Now, Preparation with the Invigoration rune here. You will not ever be using this skill, it's literally only used for the passive. Permanently increase maximum discipline by 15. That's what, 225% damage increase on your multi-shot. Pretty much need that. I mean, it's just so good. Lastly, this one you can change to Vengeance. I use with the Sieve rune. Now this is just basically when I fight a Rift Guardian, I pop Vengeance, and then I just start going crazy, just spam right clicking, because you get such huge hated regeneration. You can just spam your multi-shot for days, and obviously your rockets are flying off, hitting everything else. Most people, I would say more than not, use Vengeance would use Cold Drops instead. You get 10% crit damage, no, 10% crit chance, sorry, when you proc them on enemies. I mean, that's better for general play, for killing trash mobs and things. That's going to obviously work a lot more, because Vengeance is on like a 90-second cooldown. So it's up to you. If you feel like you're struggling at killing bosses, Vengeance is the way to go. If you're fine, then Cold Drops is definitely a better choice. In terms of passive skills, Ambush, deal 40% damage to enemies with 75% health. That's huge, especially against Rift bosses. It gives you a lot of damage before your Bane of the Stricken is procced up. Steady Aim, as long as there are no enemies within 10 yards, all damage is increased by 20%. Works with his Ice Stone of Vengeance, you're going to be stood miles back, you're going to be trying to stood 50 yards back, so that's pretty much always going to be up unless something's teleported on your head. Cold of Weak, procs with your slows, procs with your Bane of Trap slow, procs well with teammates as well that are also slowing, increases damage against slowed or chilled enemies by 20%. I'd say that's definitely the least useful perk here. If you don't like Cold of Weak, swap it out for Awareness. If you have a Hellfire necklace with one of these skills, there you go, use Cold of Weak and Awareness. Awareness is actually just keeps you alive if you get hit with critical damage. Personally, I feel like, because I play with a team, I'm stood so far back that I just don't really get damaged anyway to that point, and most teams play with heal monks anyway, so you're not going to be getting hit critically. Last but not least, Ballistics. Probably the most important with this build. People neglect the damage that the rockets actually do. It actually hits for quite a significant amount of damage. So Ballistics is where I'd go with that, definitely. You can swap them out for other things if you feel things are better. Nothing's really set in stone in terms of passives. You just tend to want to go with ones that will increase your DPS. So lastly, we're going to go have a look at the Kanai's Cube. For weapons, Calamity, enemies where you hit become marked for death. That is like must have. Marked for death, 20% damage increase. Because he's such an AoE heavy build, you basically proccing marked for death on everything. You can swap this out for Thunder Fury, slowing enemies, slowing their movement speed. That obviously works with your Bane of the Trapped. It's up to you. If you're playing solo, maybe Thunder Fury is better than Calamity. I would say probably not. In terms of the armor, Cindercoat reduces the resource cost of fire skills by 30%. Guess what Multishot is? A fire skill, reduced on that. Guess what your Vault is? A fire skill, reduced cost on that, right? 81 discipline, use it once. 78 discipline. You can vault like 20 odd times. Obviously, do not vault when you're clearing out torments. People neglect this. You vault, you lose discipline, therefore you lose damage. Be careful you don't over vault and lose all your DPS, is what I'm saying. And in terms of the ring, convention of elements is pretty much the only way to go here. I mean, when it rolls onto fire, your fire skills do 200% damage. When it rolls onto cold, your evasive fire is going to be doing a bunch of damage. And when it rolls onto arcane, which hunters and DPSs do not do, you're getting extra arcane damage. Oh yeah. But yeah, I'd only really go to convention of elements here. Now I'm going to jump into a riff for you guys just to show you the way you'd actually do your combos. I'll equip my gems for now, just so I'm not actually doing 0 DPS. I'll just jump into a Nephilim Rift. What am I on here? Torment 9. I mean, you can do Torment 10 easy. I wouldn't recommend doing Torment 10 for farming. But here's what you'll be doing. You'll basically be using your evasive fire, which procs obviously your ring, and then in between your evasive fire shots you're going to be spamming multi-shot. So I'll go find some enemies. I'll proc your evasive fire, keep walking back while proccing your multi-shot. Same again, evasive fire, walking back, proccing multi-shot. If you're using Taiguk, make sure you're constantly doing this, like even when there's no enemies, just going like this. Might take some getting used to. Make sure you learn how to shift walk. By that I mean press shift so it uses your attack and then you're able to walk. You come across a bunch of enemies you don't like, proc your companion. See this yellow here, you proc that. You're like, oh, this guy's too tough. You play your vengeance and then you just spam a bit. You take too much damage, you heal. Good to go. That's pretty much it. Use Vault if you're in a sticky situation or you're in a shitty rift that's too easy and you can just roll forward and just, you know, if you don't need the damage, if you just one-hitting stuff anyway, then you can just use that. And once again, preparation, never use it. Ever. Just because you're going to lose like 200% damage and you do not want that. So anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this build guide. Obviously it's up for interpretation, a lot of it is still in the works. There are lots of things you can change, there are lots of things you can change to fit your playstyle. This is my playstyle. If anything you'd recommend that I change, just leave me a comment and I'll obviously have a think about that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I'll see you guys next time.